when a wealthy rancher spotted a young nurse shivering alone at a snowy railway station. He couldn't just ride past. Stepping down from his horse, he offered warmth to a stranger whose eyes carried more sorrow than the winter sky. What began as mercy soon turned into a bond that would test every truth he lived by. Watch till the end to find out how one act of kindness changed both their lives forever. Tell us where you're watching from, join our Sleep West family, and let's ride into the story.
Alara Vance's strength failed her, and she collapsed heavily onto the wooden platform bench, which was rimmed with hard, biting frost. Her medical satchel, worn and scarred from years of demanding use, was gripped against her chest like a protective shield. The low, mournful sound of the southbound steamer's whistle faded into the deep silence of the Montana Territory night, a chilling echo of her vanished opportunity. The last scheduled boat heading east was gone, and with it, her final desperate hope of outrunning the damaging consequences of her past choices. A painful, creeping numbness started to claim her fingers. January of 1891 was proving a harsh, unforgiving master. The wind, a relentless icy torrent roaring down from the unseen jagged mountain peaks, shredded the protection of her thick travel cloak, even the quality wool one stitched for her in Boston. It was completely useless against the frontier's elemental cold. Tiny, needle-sharp ice crystals began to drift down from the black sky, a soft but unmistakable warning of a coming blizzard. The solitary oil lantern fixed above the bench flickered weakly, its light a frail, sickly yellow that barely pushed back the gloom. Alara attempted to stand, forcing her legs to obey, but her knees betrayed her, buckling beneath her weight. She refused to accept this ending. Not here, not on this forgotten railroad spur named Red Rock Crossing, with her professional credentials stolen and every last penny of her savings lost to a petty thief. Dignity, a cold and brittle thing, was her final possession, and it couldn't even generate a spark of warmth. The sudden loud crunch of iron horseshoes on the frozen ground sliced through the wind's continuous roar. Alara forced herself to look up through the veil of swirling snow. A rider, a huge imposing figure clad in dark layers, reined in a great powerful black stallion that snorted jets of steam into the sub-zero air. The man dismounted with a practiced fluid grace, moving toward her with an unhurried, deliberate purpose. The outpost closed for the night, Alara managed, hating how the cold had put a shameful tremor in her voice. "I got eyes, thank you, ma'am." His voice was a low, resonant baritone, dry as aged whiskey. "Are you waiting for a welcoming committee out here?" The train had departed, the last one heading for the coast. "Left over an hour ago. You missed your passage. I'm painfully aware." He halted a few feet away, observing her without any readable expression. He appeared closer to 50 than 35, his face a rugged, compelling roadmap of hard trails and harsh winters. His heavy sheepskin coat and quality rifle suggested a man with means and quiet competence. "I require no assistance, and certainly not your pity," she stated, pulling the lapels of her cloak tighter. "Pity's not a thing I carry." He extended a large gloved hand, the leather cracked and stained from work. "But I won't abandon another human being to freeze solid on my piece of land." Alara looked at his hand, then at the boundless hostile darkness beyond. She felt the crippling ache in her own frozen hand, now a faint alarming blue in the weak lamplight. She placed her cold fingers into his. He hauled her to her feet with an unexpected, almost surgical strength, steadying her when the sudden movement caused her head to spin. Standing close, he smelled distinctly of cured hide, fragrant wood smoke, and a faint, sharp scent of distant pine, a scent of unyielding resolve. "Kit Carson," he introduced himself. "Around here they often call me the keeper for the strict way I manage my holdings." Alara Vance. He lifted her onto the stallion's back as if she weighed nothing, then swung up behind her with effortless power. His greatcoat was instantly settled around her shoulders, a solid encompassing weight of fur and wool. As they rode away toward the dark, ominous silhouettes of the mountain peaks, the intense radiating heat at her back, the sheer presence of the man, felt anchor solid and undeniably real. For the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she permitted herself to relax and lean into his support. "No charity?" Alara woke to the pleasant, cheerful crackle of a fire and the rich, comforting aroma of brewing chicory. "Take it slow." Kit's voice, now rougher from sleep, came from the cabin's doorway. He held out a steaming, heavy metal mug. "You were dangerously close to hypothermia. Drink this. It's potent." She took inventory. She was in a spacious, sturdy cabin, his well-kept hunting lodge on the Double K Ranch. "I will earn my lodging," she stated firmly, pushing herself upright. "I am an experienced surgeon's assistant and nurse. I refuse to be a burden, Mr. Carson. I am not a charity case." "Respect," he murmured, his arms crossed over his chest. "I can respect that boundary. And if you're offering your labor, I won't refuse good help. This territory is brutal on men." As if on cue, a loud cry of distress and the sound of splintering wood erupted from the stables. A ranch hand named Avia had severely lacerated his arm. Alara grabbed her satchel and moved instantly, taking control of the chaotic scene in the barn. She cleaned the deep wound, stitched the torn flesh with swift, precise motions, and set the bone, all within 12 minutes. The men watched, mesmerized by her competence. 3 days was the schedule, Kit said, his eyes finally meeting hers over Javier's exhausted body. "Now you work, you stay. No charity exchanged." "No charity," she agreed, meeting his gaze evenly. The inevitable small-town cruelty of Canyon Gap was waiting. Outside Fargo's Provisions, Mrs. Thorne, the local pillar of judgmental society, approached them. "One must, however, ask what form of payment Miss Vance is providing for her upkeep, Mr. Carson. Such arrangements look ill-favored." Alara's face burned. Kit stepped closer, his hand resting briefly and deliberately on her shoulder, a silent, territorial assertion. "Miss Vance is a highly skilled surgical nurse. She saved Javier's hand yesterday. The Double K is infinitely safer with her on the property." He faced Mrs. Thorne directly. "Your husband's bank has been attempting to acquire the Little Dog tribe's ancestral lands for pennies, Eleanor. Before you speak of morality, perhaps you should examine your own foundation. People will still chatter, Mr. Carson. Let them break their teeth on it." He paid for a thick fur-lined coat and handed it to Alara. Later she asked, "What if you didn't?" when he spoke of her leaving in 2 days. He didn't offer a quick answer, and the silence became taut. "1 more week," Alara conceded, the words barely audible. "Just to ensure Javier's hand is healing properly. My professional responsibility." Kit nodded once, his eyes dark. 1 more week. They both understood the fragile lie. Trust in the storm. The magnificent mare Luna was dying from a painful gut torsion. Kit was utterly paralyzed by grief. Luna was the last living link to his late wife, Serafina. "I can attempt the surgery," Alara said, her voice strained. "I need you to hold the lantern steady. You cannot waver for an instant." 2 hours of grueling surgery later, the mare lived. They sat outside the barn, utterly spent. "I couldn't save Serafina," Kit confessed, his voice raw with 5 years of guilt. "You cannot carry that weight," Alara insisted. "I lost everything in Philadelphia because I chose the pauper who had a chance at life over the influential son who was already past saving. A clear conscience bought me ruin. But you just saved a life because you trusted me with the light. Why did you really come to this wasteland?" "Because I am exhausted by being penalized for doing good." He finally understood. The whiteout descended at dusk, trapping Kit in Alara's cabin. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, the air thick with unspoken truths. "I haven't visited Serafina's grave in almost a year," Kit confessed. "It feels like a complete betrayal." "She would want you to live," Alara said simply. "You are allowed to heal." As the fire weakened and the cabin grew frigid, Alara made a purely necessary, pragmatic decision for survival. She moved beside him, wrapping them both tightly in a heavy wool blanket for warmth. Kit's arm came around her shoulders, hesitant at first. Her head settled naturally into the safe hollow of his neck. They sat for hours, not speaking, simply sharing breath and body heat. "Alara," he whispered later, his voice low with genuine feeling, his eyes reflecting the dwindling firelight. "Kit," she responded, her hand reaching out to firmly grasp his, a silent, powerful acknowledgement of their absolute reliance on one another against the raging elements and the cruel world. They rested, wrapped together, the storm howling outside, finding simple, necessary refuge in proximity. The following Sunday, the atmosphere inside the Canyon Gap Church was thick with false piety and quiet malice. Jasper Carson, Kit's slick, ambitious younger brother, stood with Mrs. Thorne, effectively cornering Alara Vance near the front pews while the silent congregation watched. Jasper's face was sharp with triumph as he delivered his final blow. "You must vacate the Carson property by week's end, Miss Vance. My authority as co-owner is not up for discussion." It was precisely at this agonizing moment that Kit Carson pushed open the heavy oak doors, his presence instantly commanding the room. Alara looked at him, and for a heart-stopping second she saw everything. The intense strain, the calculation of public cost versus private need, and then, crucially, the hesitation. He froze, unable to choose her over the town's harsh judgment. That single painful moment of wavering was the final devastating blow to Alara. She didn't pause. She turned, her back straight and rigid with injured pride, and walked straight past Kit without a word, vanishing into the harsh winter light outside. Kit stood motionless until the church doors sighed shut behind her. Later that day he found his hunting cabin empty. The little bit of life she'd brought to the space was gone. Her sturdy sheepskin coat, the one he'd bought her, was folded neatly on the cot, a final rejected offering. His friend, Old Man Quill, found him sitting in the deepening gloom. "You hesitated, boss," Quill observed quietly, leaning against the doorframe, his wisdom worn deep into his face. She saw it, plain as day. "You already lost Alara through fear. But maybe, just maybe, she'd let you fight to earn her back if you finally choose her over the ghosts." For 2 long weeks Alara poured her energy into grueling, mindless labor, scrubbing floors in the rough-and-tumble Iron Stag Saloon. The harshness of the work was a welcome shield against the pain of Kit's betrayal. She kept to herself, determined to survive alone. The cold of the town was a predictable misery, but the silence of the solitude was shattered when a terrified scream cut through the frozen air outside. Martha Thorne, Mrs. Thorne's young daughter, had collapsed with acute appendicitis. Alara acted with immediate professional certainty. Ignoring the saloon's chaotic environment, she commandeered the kitchen table, sterilized a butcher knife in boiling water, and used a massive dose of whiskey for the anesthetic. In a frantic 30-minute surgery, working under the flickering light of oil lamps held by nervous saloon girls, Alara saved the girl's life. She asked for no thanks, no payment, and no change of heart, just doing the work that defined her. That Sunday morning Kit rode into Canyon Gap, his face grim and unshaven, but his eyes blazing with clear resolve. He walked down the center aisle of the church, demanding attention with his sheer presence. The congregation's hymn died and he began to speak, his voice powerful and ringing with self-contempt. 2 weeks ago I stood silent when this entire town judged Alara Vance. I was paralyzed by fear, he confessed, looking at no one and everyone, afraid of losing what little respect I had left. But you want to judge morality? Judge mine. She is the most honorable, most decent person I know, and I was too much of a coward to say it when it truly mattered. Kit then walked directly to Alara, stopping right in front of her. "Miss Vance, I am standing here broken and honest in front of every person who tried to drive you out, and I am asking, will you be my wife? Not for respectability, and not to quiet the gossip, but because I cannot, and will not, live another day without you in my life." "You hesitated before," she said, her eyes searching his for any trace of doubt. "I did," he affirmed, his voice rock solid. "I won't again. Ever." "Then yes." The church erupted in stunned chatter and excited gasps. The applause started small, then grew into a thunderous roar, quickly including the entire newly humbled congregation. The Reverend married them instantly. April brought the green to the frontier. The small cabin had expanded into a solid home with new windows and a generous porch. Alara, now Dr. Carson, ran a bustling clinic from an added room, welcoming all who needed care. She had earned the respect she deserved. One evening, Alara stood on the porch, her hand resting on her gently rounded 6-month belly. The baby kicked, a firm, insistent beat of new life. Kit wrapped his strong arms around her. "You know what I realized?" she reflected, resting her head on his shoulder. I spent so much time running from judgment and fighting fires that I forgot to use my energy for building anything that truly mattered. And now, Kit prompted softly, and now we are building everything, together, from the ground up. The sun set in a stunning deep gold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Carson," Kit whispered, his voice rich with hard-won peace. Alara's hand covered her belly, feeling the solid promise beneath her palm. "I've been home for a long time now, Kit." The mountains turned deep indigo. The land seemed to breathe, alive, healing, and holding them securely.